Douglas, thanks so much for joining me today. We had a lot of fun chatting yesterday, kind of preparing for this. You're always a fun conversation, so I'm excited to share your insight, your love for SMU with a larger audience. But before we get started, please introduce yourself to those who don't know you yet.
Mitch, thank you. Douglas Newby, and I'm really excited to be able to share some of my stories about SMU.
And I think what'll be fun today is you have such a history of things that I think for this audience will care about, from SMU to Dallas to kind of life as a resident between the two, right? And so
Yes.
I think you have a lot of great insights, not only from the career you've built, and, we'll talk on the business side of what you've been able to do, but also how that intertwines with life and homes and things that matter to our daily lives, regardless if you're an SMU student, but just a Dallas resident. So before we get to that part, tell us a little bit about your SMU or, origin story. You're from Illinois. How did you find the campus? And then kind of where did it take you from there?
Well, I was raised in Hinsdale, which is a 150-year-old village west of Chicago, and it has kind of a Highland Park atmosphere.
Hmm.
And Ken Malcolmson, who is a former SMU alumni um,
One of my one
chairman.
of my one of my first interviews was old Ken Malcolm's in.
Well, well, good, because like I say, I mean, I Ken is, so SMU
Yeah,
and a perfect person to lead off your
yeah,
series with.
yeah.
So Ken's older brother, Larry Malcolmson, was a student at SMU, and we had looked at other schools and various things, but Larry invited us down for homecoming weekend, our senior year. So we went down there, stayed in the fraternity house, went to homecoming, and it was supposed to be a 2-day trip. And and I remember we called our parents every day for, like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, saying we got a flat tire on the way to the airport because
Right.
we loved SMU so much. And what impressed me, I knew sports and kind of followed sports, and Dallas felt like a minor league city, which they had a
Mm.
lot of minor league teams, about to be a major league city.
Mm.
And SMU expressed to me Dallas and Dallas SMU, and just walking on campus and seeing these, beautiful blue skies. I might mention beautiful women, and everybody was smiling. And
Mhm.
you saw smiles on college campuses so seldom. And there was just an optimism about Dallas and SMU and where it was headed. I thought, I really want to be a part of this. And I'm usually, you know, have trouble making decisions, and this was the easiest decision of my life and the best decision of my life, and immediately decided to go to SMU. The other thing that was interesting is that Ken's older brother was a big deal on campus, great friends with our current chairman of SMU, the great
Mm.
David Miller, and I think he was roommates with a famous cheerleader, Heather
Mhm.
Holland, and and Chuck Hickson
Oh, yeah.
was so all these iconic SMU people were 3 years older, but was introduced to kind of the iconic people of SMU, which
Right.
I still revere.
Amazing. What a great entrance and introduction to the school through those eyes. What you mentioned it's the best decision you made, one of the easiest decisions you made. Did you, outside of kind of the experiences, the people, the beautiful campus, was there something you knew you wanted to study when you got onto campus, or were you kinda like, "Hey, let's take advantage of all the courses we have, a young mind, and kind of explore what's out there."
Well, it was interesting. I was attracted. No, I well, wait, take that back. I mean, I was attracted to really all the aspects. I was really impressed, for instance, with the Meadow School of Arts and how
Mhm,
and Bob Hope and the communications. Not that I wasn't a major in that.
mhm,
Wait a minute, actually, yeah, well, not that I wasn't a major in that, but the breadth of SMU seemed to embrace all of my interest,
Mm,
and it turned out that I pursued those interests and those interdisciplinary degrees, and as you know, mentioned, that I took courses in actually 5 different schools at
mhm.
SMU, and still have relationships with those people, professors or deans or provost, even today.
And I think that's something that's kind of lost on maybe the greater audience of SMU is that it does have this expansive network of schools and majors and things that people can study. It's not just a business school, right? Meadows, Dedman, the Liberal Arts College, engineering, law. There's something for everybody there, right? And you are a good example of someone who was able to pick and choose pieces from all that to create this experience that you can tell us a little bit more that led you to a decade on campus because of your love for learning and all the opportunities that SMU presented you, right?
Well, yes, and then the other thing is, I mean, there have been, decades where I was on the SMU campus almost every day
Hmm.
as, um not as a student. And this might be the soft courts when they still had them next to the swimming pool or the pool, or many of the programs, or there was kind of a reason, or writing. One of my favorite places was the Bridwell reference library in the theology quad. Um, so SMU really is open to people returning and being part of that community, even when they're not studying there. And the relationships just aren't, people say, well, this is good networking for business. And but I think it's deeper than that, because the friendships that people have with the professors, and like say the deans and provosts and administrators, along with the students, younger students and students that are older, um, that really infiltrates your life and helps propel you
Mm.
in all of your interest, both business, civically, socially.
I love it. And when I think of like the stereotypical college student and experience, I think of Douglas Newby. You're on campus all the time, you're intellectually stimulated, you're taking courses from all the schools, getting to know your professors and your peers, and really all in on the college experience. How did you think about what you wanted to do from a career, right? We know you now as someone ingrained in Dallas residential homes and the fabric of the city, but how did that start? Did you always love homes, love communities? Were you just a people person and you wanted to help people? How did that evolve from all those things you were studying to say, okay, this is a path I at least want to try, right? We all know your first job might not be your last job. Kind of how did you think about that as school started coming to an end and a career was on the way?
Well, I guess kind of like my major, when you're signing up for courses and your academic advisor looks at the courses you've taken and say, looks like a social science major, because there's a broad range
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
interest. Um, but and I was thinking about this, just before we began, that my career as a real estate agent was really formed um, by my civic interest
Mm,
in revitalizing a neighborhood. But the person, and I had not thought about this in years, but the person that suggested I get my real estate license was the dean of Dedman College, Lee
mm,
McAllister. And the
wow.
way that happened is that Virginia Talkington McAllister and Lee had formed the framework of the revolving fund, which would be a historic preservation league fund that bought options that would come due in 6 months or a year or 2 years
Mm-hmm.
on slum landlord apartments that can be converted to single family. And
Mm,
so we put together the structure, this organizational structure. I was going to be over the investment committee, and so anyway, so I was part of the executive committee and one of the founders. But all of a sudden, we had this in place, but there wasn't a real estate broker or agent that knew the
Mm,
neighborhood.
mm.
And Lee said, "Well, you're the youngest and the poorest here. Why don't you get your real estate license?" And I said, "Well, the only reason I'm the poorest is because I got an undergraduate degree in liberal arts." And but I said, "Okay."
Yeah.
So I went down actually with some academics on a drive to Oaxaca, Mexico, in the back seat, studying my real estate
Exam.
test booklet.
Wow.
Came back, took my test, and my first real estate transaction was the most complicated one I ever did. Within a week's time, I had arranged 21 options spanning that 6 months to 2 years from multiple absentee property owners that had rent houses, and had to get them all under contract at one time before they knew something was going on.
Wow.
And then once we had these options, then they could be sold one at a time. And with the money from the sale of that, could buy the next one. And
Wow.
this was really a successful project and gave the Historic Preservation League, they made enough money on this. The fund didn't really revolve except for those 21 houses, but did give
Mhm.
them enough profit to hire their first executive director of what's now
Wow.
Preservation Dallas.
And so how did that kind of concept come about? You found this part of Dallas that you think was ripe for preservation, or like something that you saw something happening in that part of town that could be improved? Kind of bring it back a
Th-
little bit for us who aren't in that
yeah.
space.
I'm glad you mentioned that because this is again, so SMU. I spent a lot of time in the ceramics department and um, not part of my major, but had a passion and was really pretty good at it.
Mhm.
And James Searles, which is a nationally known artist, and several others, but he had was one of the first people in Munger Place, kind of an urban pioneer
Mhm.
artist. And there was an artist next door to him who was a ceramicist. And so I'd visit them and they would have, parties and various things, or I'd help in the
Mhm.
studio.
Mhm.
So I've been introduced to Munger Place through them. And I remember James Searles said, "Well, you ought to, buy a house." Well, I thought, okay. So I bought a house down the street,
Mhm.
and I sometimes refer to Tremont artists because there were probably 7 or 8 or 9 artists that have a national reputation that all lived in Munger Place.
Mm.
Dave McManaway being one of them, who became the late David McManaway, became a great friend and has several pieces at the museum and elsewhere. So even arriving in Munger Place was because of my SMU connections with artists to identify neighborhoods. And Munger Place at the time it was the first planned development in Dallas, and it was far and away the most expensive, prestigious, beautiful neighborhood when it started in 1905.
Mm.
By the mid 70s, the city had identified it as the worst neighborhood in Dallas, the highest
Oh, wow.
crime, transient disease,
You
demolition. I
name
mean,
it. Yeah.
it was, yeah, it was all. But I saw it through the lens of Hinsdale, where we had similar aged architecture and tree-lined streets. And if you looked at dusk and squinted your eyes, you could see beyond 4 front doors to apartments and 50 slum tenants
Mhm.
inside. I
Mhm.
go, "Well, this is a good project that I will do, um, kind of my civic contribution to civilization now versus trying to make a fortune and then do it at the end of my career."
Mm.
So I front loaded and I was on several boards in my 20s and early 30s. I front loaded my kind of board participation on the front end because I was getting to be surrounded by really the titans of Dallas. I thought this is a
Mm.
lot more interesting than doing something else.
Yeah.
Um, but that's how that kind of started.
And so you have success and a passion. I'm sure your passion builds for this type of work. And neighborhoods, and you start to have an appreciation for the types of homes and the builds, and maybe you already had an artistic eye. It sounds like from things in you either growing up or ceramics, you kind of looked at life through that lens. Once Munger Place kind of maybe starts to wind down, are
But
you
we just said, and one of the things too, since we mentioned Hinsdale, that you don't know you're surrounded by great architecture, but when
right?
you're riding your bike through these tree-tunneled streets and so
Mm,
forth, you're looking at the details of these houses in the early 1900s and how graceful, and you're looking at a little architectural detail. You
yeah,
don't know you're being an architectural critic,
right.
but your eye acclimates yourself to good architecture.
No, that's
And
a
and 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 when you're revitalizing a neighborhood, I realized that programs don't revitalize economic incentives and programs don't revitalize the neighborhood. What revitalizes a neighborhood is creating a marketplace. You've got to put buyers and
mm,
sellers together. And the commission on selling one of these horrible rundown houses was about the same as selling the commission on selling a Kirby vacuum cleaner door to door.
mm,
And you have to explain how this 4-unit apartment can be turned into a single family house, and this really appalling space can be your home. And so if you can sell a home in Munger Place, you can sell one anywhere. But that's where I began having, facade drawings to say,
mhm,
"This is what the house will look like with one front door and a front porch," put back on. I would have architectural floor plans done of the house to see what the floor plan would be, and this is
wow,
before real estate agents ever use floor plans. I was the first real estate agent in Dallas to ever do floor plans of a house. Now everybody does it, but I
yeah,
was the first one because I was painting a picture of the home. So the things I learned selling things that were impossible to sell, then I would apply to the homes in Highland Park and Preston Hollow that
wow,
would have a natural audience,
right,
but you still can narrate and articulate those homes. And one of the reasons I specialize in historic and architect designed architecturally significant homes is because those homes have more to narrate
mhm. Oh, I love
and
that.
and land that has more attributes to discuss.
Mm. So, and then you kinda helped us into the next transition here, but did you when you were doing the Munger project, did you know this was gonna be a career for you, or you were gonna spend time investing in homes and helping people and kinda telling stories of homes, or did it just kinda snowball and one after another, next thing you know, you woke up 20 years later and you've been in this world?
The the focus, like I say, because I my entire career, I put a good amount of time and resources towards my civic interest and kind of, I don't wanna say making it a bit civic interest, illuminating, propelling, trying to make a contribution to the city. In this case, it was so focused on Old East Dallas, which is now 3 historic districts. There's
Mhm,
the, Jefferson Peak Historic District, Munger Place Historic District, and Junius Heights Historic District, with the base of the single family zoning of this 2,000 house area that was all zoned for apartments and got then back zoned to single family. And so the first part of the career was just specifically, and the Swiss Avenue Historic District was just selling homes, um, basically close enough that I could walk to.
mm,
And then at some point, I said, "All right, um, I'm so closely associated with this area that I'm going to just cold turkey not take any listings east of Central Expressway
mm,
and just work from Highland Park to Preston Hollow so that, I'm perceived and there wasn't anybody identifying the architects and architecture like I was doing in East Dallas in
Right.
that part of town. And as a result, I sold really important houses in Preston Hollow, really important houses in Highland Park, and I introduced homeowners and let them know who their architect was.
Right.
They didn't know beforehand.
Wow.
And did a
Uh,
50 significant home project for the architects. They asked me, to chair it, but it's the 50 significant home project where we identify 50 significant homes over 100 years for their 50th anniversary of the Dallas chapter of AIA, and formed a committee of the presidents of several of the museums, designers, museums, AIA, ASID,
mhm.
really presence of these organizations, which then had 5 or 6 people on the nominating committee, and this basically was the first architectural survey of Dallas. So
Uh,
as nominated homes, we'd go to the homeowners, we'd find out who the architect was,
wow.
and started generating interest in architect designed and important homes
So smart.
versus just pretty homes.
Yeah. So I don't know if you consider yourself this, but you seem to be a master brand builder, kind of marketer of yourself and kind of the way you wanted to position yourself and place yourself in a market that maybe didn't exist, right? And creating this architecturally significant kind of label that hadn't marketed matured. So, was that something that you innately understood and how to create? And then let's pivot
Well,
into
I
advice
think
for
when you said,
realtors.
marketing myself, I'm not sure I'm that great a marketer if my motto was, "Don't call me, I'll call you," and didn't carry business cards for years. So, I'm really I don't know if I'm that good at marketing myself, and most real estate agents belong to 1,000 book clubs and PTAs and one thing or another and get their business through friends and family. Um, and so I'm not sure I'm the best, marketer, but I do think what you mentioned, establishing well, there's a brand, but establishing a perception of whether it's a house, a neighborhood, an issue, a political issue. I think I'm good at that
Hmm.
because I'm tapping in to both the truth, the future, what resonates with people, and articulating that. And and I'm in a unique position as a real estate agent that I have this incredible resource of amazing people that I meet
Hmm.
and interact with, some of the smartest people in the city. And if I'm getting their input and I'm seeing the neighborhood evolve and I'm seeing the trends, and I think about that a lot. And when I have an insight, I try to share that so people understand it, both with my clients, but also with the public.
Yeah, no, I encourage everyone to go to your website. It's an amazing, you can spend hours on there learning about the city. But two things I want to make sure we cover: advice you have for people who are thinking about being a realtor or early in their career, things that you would recommend they do now given the current environment, or what would you maybe have done differently? Kind of open space there to talk about advice to those folks pursuing a career in this space.
Do it kind of opposite of what I've done, which I have a great economic model for helping my clients, but the agents that make the most amount of money have a conveyor belt and are selling dozens of homes for every home I sell. But they also might be contributing their time to different causes that are not, you know, I mean, medical causes or this or that. So, great causes. And they're generating, contacts that way. Um, but I think that a real estate agent that knows the homes beyond just what they read in MLS,
Hmm.
because anybody can read the statistics of a house. The value of a real estate agent provides is interpreting that data.
Mm,
And and the and when a real estate agent really specializes in a neighborhood or a type of home, whether it's mid-century or a specific neighborhood, then they know the nuance and the groundswell of support, or if the neighbor is going down or up. And so I think that if you're just getting started, if you're working with somebody that already has a good reputation, they can mentor you, that's great. But I think the knowledge of what you're working with is really important. And I think so many people get into business because they go, well, I love homes or I love people, which is great. But it doesn't matter if you love homes or not. Some people like to go through 50 homes just because they love going through homes. I like to ignore 48 homes and then go through two and spend like an hour and a half there because I can't get enough of it.
mm.
So I have a different approach than most people, but I think that if if a real estate agent really spends time thinking about the neighborhood and the home and what their client really desires. I've talked with so many agents that really know very little about their clients. I'd like to
Right.
know what the buyer's dog's name is and where they grew up and what high school they went to in college.
Mhm.
And I don't know what part of that information is to be helpful, but just when somebody says they want a modern home, if I know they're from Connecticut, a modern home means something different than they're from La Jolla.
Mm, mm.
So you kind of get these intuitive clues by getting to know both the buyer and then knowing the basically the product, which the product is the site, the neighborhood, and the architecture.
So let's talk about Dallas now. What neighborhoods do you love? Should people think of considering as, up and coming spots, right? A lot of our audience is maybe in their first home or hoping to look at their forever home eventually, wanting to stay in Dallas. Dallas is ever expanding with so many new neighborhoods and suburbs. How should we think about neighborhoods to pursue, value, kind of what advice do you have for us there?
But one of the things I learned as an undergraduate at SMU um, was that cities, villages, Indian villages always grow to the north and west.
Mm,
And you might be landlocked, but if you think about it, every city I've been in, every neighborhood, the older neighborhoods that are really established and prestigious are in the southeast, and all the
mm.
expansion is to the northwest. And that
Interesting.
certainly happened in Dallas. And years ago, I was saying Midway Hollow and all those areas, and Devonshire and Bluffview, but all those neighborhoods that were undervalued were the north and west.
Mm.
And sure enough, they've skyrocketed. Um, so that's kind of one truism that I find really interesting. But the other thing is a tendency to have a broad brush that Highland Park is the best. Well, it is the best, but within Highland Park, you have niche neighborhoods. Within Dallas, you have niche neighborhoods, and the neighborhoods that I've helped bring attention to, and the neighborhoods that have gone up in value the most have been these niche neighborhoods,
Mm.
and they would include um, Turtle Creek Park, which that's Stonebridge, Arrowhead, right by the Dallas Theater Center, Franklin Wright
Mhm.
Building on Turtle Creek. 26 houses, and the real estate community said this isn't Highland Park, so it should be worth half as much.
Mm.
I've sold several houses there that sold for more per square foot than the same size Highland Park home
Mm.
because the inherent quality of this neighborhood was so enticing. It didn't have the schools or the police department, but it had things that you couldn't get in Highland Park. And you have so few homes there's an audience, and people forget supply and demand, scarcity. Northern Hills is one of the most popular neighborhoods in Dallas. It was a forgotten neighborhood. I wrote the book for this book, Preservation League Guide to Older Neighborhoods of Dallas, and
Mhm.
we included 2 pages of Northern Hills, which is only 80 houses when we did this book. Now it is the, like I say, most popular neighborhood in Dallas, along with Greenway Parks. Greenway Parks is another neighborhood um, that has done so well. But
Mhm.
a really well known neighborhood is White Rock Lake,
Mhm.
and the Lakewood agents kept saying, "Well, an acre on White Rock Lake is only worth X amount. We know this is what we all talk about the Lakewood Country Club." I'm saying, no, there are only about 12 or 14 estate lots in this state cove of White Rock Lake.
Mhm.
This should not be half as much as Preston Hollow.
Mhm.
It should be more than Preston Hollow.
Mm.
And the homes I was selling were not to the people in Lakewood, but Highland Park, University Park, Lake Highlands, out of town, um, people from outside of Lakewood. So yeah, this is fabulous.
Mm.
And now those same White Rock Lake properties I sold at the time, which everybody in Lakewood said I was selling for way too high a price, they've doubled in price or
Right.
tripled in price, and now are selling for more than Preston Hollow. So this is a well-known area, but people didn't realize the inventory. They say, well, there are 3 or 4 properties for sale, so they felt like there was an endless supply.
Mhm.
Well, there are only a dozen
Mm.
or 14. So when you're looking for a house, I would look at inventory, scarcity, and what are the intrinsic values of the neighborhood. I would rather buy something in a, really distressed area with an ocean view
Mhm.
than really a pristine area 2 miles inland,
Right. Right.
because eventually that ocean view, they're gonna say, "Wait a minute, this should be developed or renovated," the people will come to it.
Yeah.
So, the intrinsic value of a neighborhood, the natural beauty of a neighborhood and potential of a neighborhood is more important than just what it looks like right now.
And we could go for a while, I think, on that topic. And I think this is a perfect place to maybe in this video or link to your TED talk that you did with SMU on homes, that homes make us happy. And you have a really great speech about just kind of what you're talking about. Think about things that make you happy as a homeowner rather than just square footage, number of bathrooms, and some of these like statistical things that people think they need to check that box. So it's an amazing conversation and speech that you give. I want to touch on a little bit too. While I've got you, kind of the state of
Well, just
home
along
building.
with that, Mitch,
Yeah.
the homes that make you happy, if a home makes you happy, it's gonna make the next homeowner happy. So
Mm.
the same things that resonate with you actually give it more value when you go to sell the home. So you can actually pay a premium for a better home, and those homes outperform the market.
And I think that's kind of led perfect. I'm glad you tied that into my next question. Is we talked yesterday a little bit about the difference between a architect kind of led design home build versus kind of more traditional home build that you see. And we all know Dallas expands. Homes have to be built. Not everything can be, um, you know, architecturally significant and at scale. But let's imagine Douglas was the head of all residential development kind of plans, or the czar of residential building in Texas or DFW. What would you like to see happen to make sure that the quality of homes are continuing to have like what you saw growing up, and that feeling of our homes still exists? Is there 2 or 3 things you could implement or kind of high level
Well,
that you would like to see done?
it is kind of interesting between, an architect designed home and, let's say, um, a cookbook plan shop home.
Mhm.
I remember the morning news did an op-ed on big air houses when they were just throwing up, these houses in University Park, and I had, gave an example because I had a march where somebody's coming into town, and we went through like 20, houses in the afternoon, which I don't do very often,
Mhm,
and every one of them of that era had Harlequin tile.
mhm,
So you first, people will go to trade shows and get things that are so trendy to date the home. So you should avoid that. But the homes that were not architect designed might have 18-inch moldings, and which cost less than an 8-inch molding that was hand crafted by
right,
carpenters. They would put in 2 staircases, front staircase and a back staircase, and both of them were the same size, probably 20 feet apart from each other. And yet, in the historic, 10,000 or even new 15,000 square feet homes, you have this beautiful, grand staircase, but then you have a back service or family staircase that's small. Well, they didn't need 2 huge staircases, but they're trying to make it feel opulent. They put
mm,
in a library instead of books, they put in library, wallpaper.
mm,
And they just it's like they're designing a home, and they're going through a cafeteria and stopping at the dessert tray, this dessert section, and throwing every dessert they can find at the
right,
house. So they need to edit it down. The other with the new developments, code is so restrictive. A lot of developments really require brick. Well, how many ways can you make brick look different? Um, so I think, code is important for safety, but architects always love designing in the country because you don't have the restrictions. You can have a
mm,
lot more creativity if you don't have as much limiting, code restrictions. So it needs to
mm,
be safe, but you can't, you know, if the code requires you to design everything exactly the same, it's going to look exactly the same, and it's going to feel dated. It'll get torn down in 20 or 30 years.
Well, Doug, this has been amazing. I could talk to you forever about this stuff, and I encourage you've been great about coming to our events and different 1911 events. So, if those who haven't sat with you at a table, definitely sit with you. Uh, and then also, I was going to say, as people visit your website, they might be a little intimidated about the homes you sell, thinking it's not right for me. But we talked about this yesterday. You're a resource to anybody, right? Regardless of what home you're trying to buy. I think you had a funny quote to me the other day saying that you've sold the least expensive home and maybe the most expensive home in Dallas.
Well, I've
So
I've definitely
there's
sold the most expensive home, and I don't think you'll find any real estate agent in business today that's sold his home as inexpensive as I've sold.
right.
And I think it's important as a real estate agent to be aware of all the different markets. And I really, the people I work with people, I work on houses that are either great or land that's great or people that are great. And that keeps me involved in all aspects of the market, which is
Hmm.
really helpful to me. And again, at the very least, I can help point people in the right direction, give
Yeah.
them some advice, and all that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again for making the time today. This has been so much fun. We're lucky to have you as a Mustang, and we look forward to seeing you at some upcoming events and checking in with you regularly on the state of residential Dallas and SMU. Uh, all insights and info we need there. So thank you again.
So, Mitch, thank you. And what you've done with SMU Stories has been so important because there's some cohesive picture with a mosaic of the different personalities that went to SMU. Everybody went to SMU for a different reason, but they all have an underlying personality and passion for the city and what they do that I think is exhibited by SMU more than any place else. And I think 1911 Group and you have really brought that out, and I'm so appreciative. So
I
thank
appreciate
you.
it. Thank you for being a part of it. We'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you to our sponsors, Sewell Buick GMC, Agility Holdings Group, Probity Advisors, Sound of a Rose, Hilltop Property Tax, Security National Bank of Texas, Boyd, Shackelford, Barnett, and Dixon, Bigham Agency, Life After Ball, SMU Cox School of Business, and Mignon Steakhouse.